What makes Bitcoin better money?
Bitcoin is better money because it's available to everyone on a fair and equal basis. You don't need to rely on any counterparty, any trusted third party. It's money for literally everyone.
What is the Bitcoin ledger?
The Bitcoin ledger is just the entire history of all the transactions that have ever been processed on the Bitcoin blockchain. It's like if you were to open up, the books and records of all of the people who've ever used this thing. It's the database that stores all of those accounting entries.
What is the blockchain?
A blockchain is just one type of database. It's a database that prioritizes security and the quality of the entries rather than the speed of the database or the amount of entries that you can put into it at any one time. It's a database that makes different trade-offs.
What is the problem that Bitcoin needed to solve?
Bitcoin needed to solve several problems. The most important is that trusted third parties govern the world around us, and Bitcoin is the most credible attempt to remove those trusted third parties. They insert themselves in the form of inflation. They insert themselves in the form of asset forfeiture and seizure. They insert themselves in the form of capital controls as a means to control a population. And until you remove the trusted third parties from money, you can never truly be free. So once you take this baseline fact to be true, which is that the trusted third parties need to be removed, the question is how? And what Bitcoin did is it put together the Lego blocks of trusted third party removal through a process called decentralization in order to allow the money to transact freely and independently. And so what that decentralization means is that there are hundreds of thousands of nodes all over the world now that are checking the validity of every single transaction. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of miners contributing hash power to process the transactions. And there are millions and millions of users who view Bitcoin as a savings tool, as a new technology to change their financial future. And so because we've distributed this tool across these different levers into hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands, and millions of hands, the ability to continue to have a system that no longer and never will rely on a trusted third party is secure.
Why is decentralization so important?
Decentralization is so important because it is the whole reason the system works. If I had to describe Bitcoin as doing one single thing, it's the certainty that the Bitcoin I own is mine, so long as I use the software as intended. And so that means that over 10 or 50 or 100 years, the Bitcoin I have is under my control no matter what. And that means that there's no counterparty who's moving a balance. There's no counterparty who's in charge of the supply. And because there's no third party involved in those steps and processes, we take on a wisdom of the crowd or a wisdom of the masses to replace that third party. And so the system is able to function in this disintermediated way. And the only thing that replaces an intermediary is a decentralized mass.
Where did Bitcoin come from?
There's a long history in America and frankly elsewhere of people trying to make non-government money, non-fiat issued, non-centrally issued. And one of those movements really dovetails with the Cypherpunk movement, where you see the early Bitcoin contributors. If you go to the Bitcoin white paper, all those citations, those are Cypherpunks. So we've seen that privacy on the internet and freedom on the internet and money on the internet are two ideas that are really closely related. And so if you look to, Adam Back and his invention of proof of work and Hashcash, if you look to Wei Dai and you look to eGold and these different kinds of historical projects, these were attempts at putting together the pieces that govern money on the internet on a decentralized basis. But all of those projects failed because they failed to achieve adequate decentralization. It was really Satoshi who first came up with the way to assemble those pieces of the puzzle in an adequately decentralized way. This means that it was future-proofed against central points of failure, future-proofed against governments and against companies trying to come in and debase this idea that is really centered around proof of work, centered around 21 million hard cap, centered around the individual owning the asset on a totally unassailable basis.